reason I do that is so now you'll remember it, right? You remember it. Okay, so IBA, we exist to communicate the Bible as authoritative, trustworthy and authoritative. And I mean that truly trustworthy, truly authoritative, beginning its first word in Genesis 1:1, extending to the last word in Revelation 22:21. So I have up there the first and last words of the Bible. The first word of the Bible is in the darker letter Hebrew. It looks like worms that have been squished on a page. And that, can anybody read Hebrew? Yeah, well, I wouldn't even if you asked me and I didn't know it, but it's Barashit. So it has a little bit of that Spanish, ba, ra, sheet. Can you say that? Ba, ra, sheet. So that's the first word of the Bible. What is the first word of the Bible? Yes, it's 3 words in English. Very good. Barashit. Can you say it again? Barashit. See, now you're a Hebrew expert. You say, well, the first word in the Bible is Barashit, and that's in the beginning. And then don't let them ask you any questions. Just go with that. All right, the last word is ponton. In Greek, ponton. And anybody have venture guess what the last word is? This one's surprising. Most people would say amen, but it would be amen. The Greek is amen. Amen, sort of like. So what is the last word? Amen is added, by the way. It's not in the original text. Ponton is actually the last word. The last word is all. What? Think about it. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Oh, that's a good ending, isn't it? It's a great ending, yeah. Okay. So here's a little video I want to show you.
There's a major struggle within Christendom, and that struggle is dividing us apart. And the struggle is how do we deal with Genesis? It is so different than what we've been taught in our science classes.
The Bible describes a world of perfect design and beauty, a garden, and then a flood that covered the earth. But isn't this just mythology? Even Christians, like the organization BioLogos, says there's never been a global flood. And our young people are listening. They're walking away from the faith because they believe science has proved the Bible wrong. I'm Dr. Kevin Horton, and I couldn't stop wondering, if the Bible is accurate about the flood, what would the evidence actually look like? That's when I learned about the Lake Missoula flood, a catastrophic event that carved incredible formations across the Northwest. I had to go out to Washington State and see for myself what massive flooding does.
That's good. Good to go. All right.
Those landscapes unlocked everything. Now I could recognize flood evidence everywhere. And then I saw it, the same features in a place that the Missoula flood never reached.
This is not anywhere near the Lake Missoula flood. This is east of the Rockies. The water is flowing to the Mississippi. The Lake Missoula flood flowed to the Pacific.
And these features were so much bigger. There had to be a worldwide flood. So I decided to keep driving.
And all of a sudden, right in front of me, oh my goodness. Wow. It was like a kid in a candy store.
After months of searching, all the same impossible formations, yet hundreds of miles apart. What if the evidence for the global flood wasn't hidden at all?
So in June, we're actually coming out with a documentary on the discoveries that you're about to see a little bit of. You're going to only see slices of it, and by the time we get done, you're going to be like, it's a lot. So hang on to your seats, and we're going to take you through the Lake Missoula flood first. So what I'm planning to do tonight is we're going to go through the Lake Missoula flood. And then I'm going to take you to Colorado and Wyoming and Utah and Arizona, and we're going to look at the Colorado River drainage. And the reason why we're going to do that is because the formations there are massive, and you can see things that don't belong there. And then we're going to go, then we'll take a break, second break, so we'll take a break between the first one and the second. And then the third one, we're going to look at a place that you're probably not familiar with. It's North Dakota and South Dakota and Wyoming and Nebraska. And we're going to explain the formations that are right here. So that'll be our last little session. And that's put there by design. That means if you leave early, you don't figure out how the Badlands got here, and how the Sandhills got there, and how the North Dakota Badlands got there. I'll explain that to you with my hypotheses. Okay, so we're going to, and also, by the way, there's a book coming out with ICR. Do you know, how many of you know ICR, Institute for Creation Research? So they're publishing a book for me that I'm almost done. That's why I was actually coming by here, is I was out filming for the book. And the book will be published by them, and it will have those QR codes, those funny little things you take a picture with your camera, and it'll take you to the videos. So you'll have the book, it'll take you through things, and then you'll be able to watch videos that I've filmed on these. So it's going to be quite unique, and that's coming out when I get it done, but probably by next fall. Okay, Carved by Water. So when I grew up in North Dakota, in Dickinson, I would see these things all over the place. I saw them all over here out here as I was coming up on highways. Is 79 from Hot Springs? Is that the highway? And there's buttes all over the place. And in North Dakota, in Dickinson, there was a Air Force base right on top of the butte. And then, as you drive west from Dickinson 30 miles, you're on the prairie like this. You're just going along, and then all of a sudden, it drops into Badlands. I mean, there's a line. You could draw a line where it changes direction. And yet, actually, that line is where one water goes east, the other one goes north. And how did that form? That is like weird to me. And I've seen that in multiple places in Montana as well, along the Missouri River breaks, just like that. And then farther west by Sentinel Butte, there's these, I call them cone formations. This would be a cone field. It looks like a bad case of acme on the ground. And there's a whole bunch of them. And I remember I'd go hunting out there on Sentinel Butte, which is kind of coming into the view over there on the right. And I'd go up on that butte, but I have to pass that cone field all the time. I thought, how did those get there? And actually, you'll see those around here too. You'll see these cone shapes just all over the place. And so then there's this wacko place of South Dakota with their Badlands. That is like nothing I've ever seen before. The South Dakota Badlands are unique. How did they get there, and why are they there? Why do they look like they do? And so we're going to take a look at another view. Now, the Daily Beast said they didn't believe in the flood of Noah. But I'm going to tell you, I think all the formations that I saw when I was growing up in North Dakota are related to Noah's flood. And we're going to show you how. All right? Daily Beast was not a Christian organization. They like to poke fun at the flood of Noah. But the one that gets me was Biologos. That is a Christian organization. And they specifically go out to teach churches how to deal with Genesis and not believe it. Basically. And they say this: the scientific and historical evidence is now clear. There's never been a global flood that covered the entire earth. That is what we're facing. That is what we're facing. And this is being shouted with great authority. And I have a response. Let's see what aerial photography teaches us. Okay? So what is the issue here? And that's what we want to start with. What's the issue? It's the issue of deep time or a young earth. Here's what it is. Here's the issue. Look at the Grand Canyon. You see that little hypothetical bracket that's labeled A, and you see those layers next there? So maybe they're 100 feet thick, okay? And there's a couple different layers there. From a deep time perspective, that could be 3 million years worth of Earth history. From a young Earth point of view, it could be 1 week of a flood surge. Okay, there's a total different way of looking at the same data. All right? So if you believe that the Bible is trustworthy, and this is so interesting, I'll say, do you believe the Bible's trustworthy? Oh, yeah. Do you believe the flood of Noah was real? Yeah. Then do you realize that those layers were laid down during the flood of Noah? No. No, those took millions of years. No, that's the options. That's the options. What's interesting about those layers, by the way, did you notice that this one layer and there'll be another layer on top of it is perfectly flat, and the next layer is perfectly flat? And there's 10,000 years between those layers, and there was no erosion. Do you see that? Aha! Well, wait a minute. Okay, that was run by the flood of Noah. Now, take a look at this canyon. It's about 400 feet top to bottom, 300 to 400 feet. Here's my question for you. How many years do you think it'd take to cut this canyon, or did it take? We know, actually. I used to show this at county fairs. It was so interesting to do. I'd show them this picture and say, how many years do you think it took to cut this canyon? And it depended on which county. Ravalli County, where I live, is fairly conservative, and about 1/3 of the people would get pretty angry with me. Missoula County, on the other hand, Miriam knows this, we had about an 85% rejection rate. We even had a university professor try to tear our fair display down. This ticks them off because we know that this one took 3 days to cut. 3 days to cut. We know it. And this, by the way, I took that picture here, and then I turned this way and took this picture of beautiful falls, Palouse Falls State Park in Washington State. And I noticed, it was about a year after I'd been there, I noticed, well, what is that like comb thing sitting there? Like a hen's comb, on a hen. And I went in, I zoomed in on it, and look at those little spicules up on top, like projections. And I thought to myself, how many millions of years do you think those would take freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing and rain? Not millions. They'd be gone. So anyways, those were formed by the Lake Missoula flood. Okay, how many of you have heard of this before tonight? Okay, so the rest of you, hang on, okay? I'm going to back up. When I moved to Montana from Iowa, and I took a job down the Bitterroot Valley, which is south of Missoula, and in going through Missoula, I saw these lines on the side of the mountain. I didn't know what they were. North Dakota we had, in South Dakota you have them, and they're usually going like this. That's wildlife lines, paths. But these are like parallel up the mountain. For 20 years I saw them and never knew what they were because nobody talks about it. Because it's really interesting. All right, so it was discovered by this guy, J. Harlan Bretz. He was a school teacher in Seattle, Washington, back in about 1910. And in 1915, he received some of the first topographical maps of Washington State. And in there, he sees these areas. You can see as the lines get tighter and tighter together, it's sheer cliffs. And he saw this and he said, what in the world? Because it's perfectly flat farmland, and then all of a sudden there's these cliffs. And he didn't know what caused that. And so he took his team out there, and a team of students, and they would go out every summer in his little, I guess he had a kind of one of those longer cars, I forget now. Station wagon, thank you. Yeah, with the wood panel kind of thing, yeah. And he discovered a 3-mile wide waterfall. 3-mile wide waterfall. Is it going to work? In the desert, and I'm getting stuck, with no water. And so he was wondering, what was this? And he'd found that there were deep plunge pools from the water. The water coming over and just cut holes down there, and that's where the lakes are. You can see some boats out on those lakes. And then I looked at that, and I saw that little kind of like island out there, and I went down and looked at it. That's hundreds of feet high. and it's got a sheer cliff, and then it's got this kind of apron around it that's about 45-degree angle. Well, Bretz realized that this was caused by a massive flood, short-term massive flood sometime in the past. He called it the Spokane flood because he knew the water came through Spokane, Washington. And anyways, he was called to Washington, D.C. in 1927 because he'd been publishing about this. He said, there's this big flood. And they convened a special meeting to deal with Bretz, to deal with him. And he even tells it, he says he felt like he was a young protege being taken in by the elders and being chastised to get this right. And they basically said what Bretz proposed was too much like a biblical flood. And we are scientists, not theologians. So that can't happen. We know it took millions of years. Go back and look. And he actually did. He went back out and he kept doing his work, and he kept concluding there was a big flood here. Well, it turns out there was a guy named J.D. Pardee there. And he turned and whispered, and he saw what was happening, okay? He wasn't going to get into this thing. He knew, and by the way, Bretz will be put into the geological no man's land for his entire career. 40 years. 40 years. But J.D. Pardee, he'll eventually team up with Bretz, but he turned to a partner next to him and he says, I think I know where Bretz's water came from. See, Bretz didn't know where the water came from. He says, no, it came through Spokane, but what caused it? He didn't know. He just said, I'm seeing the evidence of it. Pardee saw the evidence because he was from Missoula. And he looked and he saw those lines on the mountain that I talked about. You see them there? And when there's snow, you can catch them, you can see them a little better. And there we go. And this is a drone shot. Can you see the lines there a little bit? And you can see it goes up, partway up the mountain. It actually goes up 950 feet above the Missoula. And you can see them on both mountains. This is over from the University of Montana campus, and you can see all those lines. What are those? Well, as the lake grew up, the winds would blow from the northwest, and it would lap waves against the mountainside, and it would make a mark. Then the next spring, the snow would melt, the rains come down, the lake goes up, because there was a dam, and it wasn't going anywhere. It just filled up and filled up and filled up and filled up until 950 feet of water was above Missoula. I live in Hamilton, 650 feet above our house. And but now, let that just settle. We're going to take you on a little goose chase because it's important. That's the Sea of Cortez, kind of in that armpit of Baja, California. And my son works down in L.A., and he does electricity on different movie sets, and he had a house that he was renting down in Mexico to get away from the city. And we went down over Christmas to meet him, and he said, Dad, this is the weirdest place. When it's high tide, the ocean is right here. When it's low tide, it's a mile. A mile. And this is what it looks like. It's a mile of sand until you get to the edge of the ocean. And then high tide comes in, and it's back up to shore, and then it's back out, and it's a mile. And you know, all of those little ripples, you can rip them up, tear them up, and they'll just form again, and the next time around, as the water goes out, it makes the ripples. Well, that's the point. See, the other thing that Pardee saw was not only the lines on the mountain, but about an hour out of Missoula, in a place called Camas Prairie, which is in nowhere, okay, is a series of water ripples. These are water ripples like I showed you on the sand there, only these water ripples vary from 45 feet high to 20 feet high. I have a little parachute aircraft. I flew over it, and I measured them from the air by fence posts, and they go up about 25 feet average, and the upper end is 45 feet high. And you can sort of see them there. You can see them. Isn't that really great? That's how the photographs were. That's why I bought a drone. You can't see them. So I got the drone. This is what they look like. And those are on the side of the mountain. And that's when the dam broke, and the water's ripping off there, and it left those water ripples there. I had to see that, and I knew regular photography wouldn't do it. I had to get above it. And so there they are. There's trees off in the distance, and those will be important later on. We'll look at this. And you see, water's flowing two different directions as it came over the top of this ridge. It flowed two different directions, and There's those trees, and here's where it's flowing the other direction. This is where they're about 45 feet high, and then it gets down to about 25 feet towards the end. And here you can see on the still shot, you can see that the water's flowing two different directions, perpendicular to the ripples. Well, anyways, that's how Pardee knew there had to be a water coming from Missoula. He could tell it was high. And what actually happened during the Ice Age, did I say the Ice Age? I didn't say the first Ice Age or the last Ice Age. I said the Ice Age, the one that followed Noah's flood. That's the only way you can really explain the Ice Age, by the way. Michael Ord from Bozeman, Montana, does a great job of explaining that. But here is where that ice dam was, and it's literally within a mile of the Montana-Idaho state line on the Clark Fork of the Columbia River. And it's 23 miles of ice that's over 2,000 feet high blocked it off. So that water just kept backing up higher and higher and higher and higher. And then when it burst, the water rippled. So that's what Pardee saw, and he saw those lines. He knew where the water came from, but they had never put it together. And this is what it looked like when that burst. It came out, and the water flowed like that, and went down in by Portland, and literally couldn't get out the ocean fast enough, and backed up the Willamette Valley. And there's icebergs carrying Montana rocks that got left in the fields. Ice melted, and there's all these rocks from Montana all in the fields. There's about 40 or 50 of them, huge rocks called erratics. And so there is Sandpoint, Idaho. That's where the dam was. That's Palouse Falls. I showed you that falls that was cut by that in 3 days. And right there is called the Wallula Gap. It's 1.2 miles wide, but the water couldn't get through it fast enough and backed up to almost Yakima and made a temporary lake there. And then it went up to the Willamette Valley in Oregon. All right, so I took the drone out there, and I wanted to see. This is right near Spokane. It's a town of Sprague. And I noticed these things out there, and they look like little mini buttes, don't they? They got kind of flat top. They have a cliff. Now, some buttes just have this kind of apron coming down, but these had the flat top, and then they have that sheer cliff, about 90-degree angle cliff, and then they have this apron that comes out on it. And notice they're all kind of flat. And then I noticed water channels were trying to cut through and didn't always cut through. And the major flow of water went around this and out into that big plain out there and kept cutting that down. But it left those behind. So those buttes are what we call erosion remnants. They're remnants. They're left behind by the erosion. And you see the standard dimensions. That apron will be anywhere from 30 to 60 degrees, but by an average about 45-degree angle. Now there's another thing that we notice. Now notice on this one, we're going to see some water channels as I'm flying over this. There's one of those little, it's just a little rock top. And then you see water channels everywhere. But look what's coming up. This is unique and very important. It's full of these egg-shaped, round-shaped lakes. They call them pothole lakes. And the shoreline's like at a 45-degree angle, like you took a router bit around it and routed it at a 45-degree angle. And you can see that rounded edge. They're not always circular, but they'll have different shapes. But a lot of them will be perfectly round. And there is where the flood went. And that's called the Scablands of Washington. There literally aren't any paved roads out there. It's just used for sheep. It's not much used for anything. That's the Scablands of Washington. So, we learned something. Floods form these buttes. Do you see that? That's an erosional remnant from a flood. And you'll see water channels trying to cut in and around them. Okay? And then some of them will be pencil-shaped and point the direction of flow. When I was coming up on 79, I saw all sorts of pencil-shaped erosional remnants coming off the Black Hills, pointing southeast. And there'll be buttes up on top of these things, but there's these hills, and then behind them there's all these rolling hills. That's all flood. That's from flood evidence. So pothole lakes, that's very interesting. And they have this kind of oval to round shape, generally speaking. Can be oval like that. And has that 45-degree angle bank. It can vary a little bit, but it's like that. So 45-degree angle, and they're caused by turbulent whirlpools. So those whirlpools get spinning around and literally cut that circle just like that. It took a long time for scientists to figure out how that happened. All right, I'm taking you a little farther now towards the west in the Badlands of Washington State. This is Frenchman Coulee. Notice it's flat-bottomed. Now, when I say flat, it's generally flat. All right? Then you see those same dimensions. And interesting, it almost looks like a little thumb thing there, or cathedral, kind of sticking up, got left behind. Those cliffs are about 350 to 450 feet down from the top. This is not small area. But really what's coming up next is really important. This is the next major feature. Now that's erosional remnant, and I think it's related to the next feature, which is a hanging canyon or hanging valley. I found out that they most often, geologists call it hanging valleys, so I'm trying to change my nomenclature. Water was coming this way from Lake Missoula, but a larger flow came this way and cut it off. This one was cutting down, the other one was cutting down, but this one, the top one dried up, and the other one kept cutting and left that one hanging. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of just hanging up there, never eroded down. If that eroded over millions of years, it would have eroded all the way down to the other one. But it didn't. It stopped. It's hanging. That's diagnostic of floods, by the way, if you find hanging valleys. Okay? All right? So we see flat-bottom stream beds. We see 90-degree cliffs with, and I put 45-degree shoulders. They want me to use the word apron now, so I'm trying to make those changes. So anyways, that 45-degree angle that comes off of that. These are common. By the way, have you ever seen flat-bottom rivers here in South Dakota? It's fairly flat bottom, and then there's a little creek that meanders, and then there'll be a kind of a side that goes up, and then it'll be flat up on top. Okay, hanging valleys, I have to change that. They're both coming down the same, but that one dried up, the flood's getting lower, and it builds a deeper channel, and when it builds a deeper channel, the flow will actually pull it faster and dry that other one up and leaves it hanging. So remember that topographical map of Brett's where it was all flat land? There it was, and then there's where the squiggly lines started to show up. And this is one of my favorite places to go out to because there's so much here that I've learned. This is a big waterfall that came over the top, and those are plunge pool lakes below. And as I flew over this, I noticed there's a heart-shaped whirlpool-caused lake right coming up here, and you can see the banks. That gives it away, that 45-degree angle bank. And that whirlpool must have been acting kind of weird, and it cut a little heart there. But then it also cut out and let the water channel coming out. And you see it from above. And so those are all little whirlpool lakes. And then you see water channels cut. And these are going to be important to figure out as we go further, all these little water channels that are there. Okay? All right, so from the Lake Missoula flood, we see these flat surfaces on the top that's been planed down. Now remember, we had a wall of water break. When that dam burst, by the way, it was an ice dam, we don't know how it burst. But in Iceland, they have this happen all the time. And because they have so many glaciers in Iceland, that every once in a while a glacier slides, cuts off a water flow, and it builds a lake up behind it. And they call it a jökulhlaup when it's getting ready to burst. When it bursts, it's a jökulhlaup. That is a ice dam burst flood. And they found that what happens is the water gets building up pressure behind it, and the pressure behind it starts working its way through a crack. And as the water flows, it causes friction, expands the crack. In Lake Missoula, 23 miles down through the crack, a little drop of water made it. And that caused a little friction. Another drop, then faster drop, then bigger drop, then a spray, and then poof, she blew. And an 800-foot-high tidal wave went across Washington State. And that's what you're seeing here. Now, as it did this, it went planing. It spread out, so then it was about 300 feet deep, and it was spinning like planing blades on a board, right? And then as it started, the levels got lower, it would channelize, go into a channel. and it would get sucked into a channel. It's not enough to spread out. And then that channel would fill up, and it would plane the next level down. So that's how that would happen. And we'll skip through this section here. Now, this is right at that place where before, and this is a large erosional remnant pointing the direction of the water flow. And if you look at the early part of it, it almost looks like the back of a dinosaur, doesn't it? And a spine of a dinosaur. See, right there. So anyways, we'll skip that. Then we saw those vortex channels or whirlpool-caused channels, and we see where the water, and those are caused by turbulent whirlpools. And we see those water channels left behind too, giving evidence of where the water flowed. I want to take you now out to the Wallowa Gap, 1.2 miles wide. It's huge, but the water out of Lake Missoula came so much that it couldn't get through the gap and backed up into Yakima area. And in that gap, I saw this thing. It's called the Twin Sisters by the Native Americans. And has a level top. It's not flat. And it looks like stovepipe sticking on top of a shoulder of some kind and then on top of a cone-shaped base. And this is big. This is really quite big. I hiked up there, but it's a big structure that you can see up there. And notice the rounding of that upper level. I call that kind of a tower sitting on a pedestal, and then the pedestal is on a cone. The cone is elongated the direction that the water is actually flowing from there, the river as you see it now, but that was water way above that. Okay, you see the standard dimensions there? And let's see. Yeah, there we go. Water channels are there. Okay, so we see the standard dimensions, and these are, I think, turbulent whirlpools coming around this is part of the reason why that has that stovepipe shape to it. And you see that little speck in the yellow? That's me. That's how big this is, okay? This is big country. So you get that idea. So how did these form? Well, the planation. When water is flowing like that, rolling like that, it's planing the whole surface flat. Now, that doesn't mean it's flat like you took a sander on it, but it's generally quite flat. And as it gets lower, it'll get more ruddy, okay? And so it's like putting a board in a planer, and you stick the board in, it's rough, and it comes out smooth, and that's exactly what's happening to the surface of the land, okay? And then that's a sheet flow. They call it sheet flow, where it's spreading across the state. And then it goes into it's flat bottom again. That's because the water sucks into that channel and then flows and cuts that down flat again. And then potholes, those are by turbulent whirlpools. And so hanging canyons, that's because we have one flow of water takes over and keeps cutting while the other one dries up. That's going to be real important too. Okay, there we are. Glacial Lake Missoula flood. Now that's a huge state, and that's a real synopsis of the basic shapes of that area. Now, once you've got that in your mind, you're never going to see South Dakota the same. And we're going to work through that, and we'll get to that eventually. We're going to take a break right now. If there's any questions, they'll come around. If you want to use the bathrooms, go ahead and do so while I take questions. And we'll take about 5 minutes. But if there are any questions, I'll take them right now. Yeah, we'll get a microphone, I think, coming to you. So, and by the way, I was around a lot of cattle chutes, the back end of cattle chutes where the thing clanged, and I don't hear real well. So if I don't hear you, somebody interpret for me.
I really didn't have a question. I just want to see Garvin run a little bit.
There you go.
I do. So the evidence that the 3 days to cut that channel.
Yeah. Are
we saying that the flood took 3 days, or what's the evidence that you have that it was 3 days to cut that?
Yeah, and that's a range figure. It could be 2.5 to 3.5 days.
Okay.
Okay, how do we know? Well, we know the volume of water. Behind Lake Missoula Dam, there was more water than Lake Erie and Ontario put together. Okay, so, and 950 feet above Missoula, 2,000 feet above the dam, because of course it's going downhill. And when that burst, we know the space that it had to flow through and the volume of water that's going to come through there, and we figured about 2.5 to 3.5 days. Now, there is if you go to secular geologists, they will say there are as many as 50 Lake Missoula floods. The data is really questionable in my mind, because they see these layers with some ash from Mount St. Helens, and they say, well, what's the odds of the volcano going at the same time that this lake's coming through? You know, that's like minimal odds. And so each one of those layers is supposed to be another Lake Missoula flood. But I say to them, I don't care if you have 40 layers, another Lake Missoula flood, that's gone. And it's going to make new deposits. So that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Besides that, Michael Orr did a great work on this, and he said, you know what, if Mount St. Helens was anywhere close to erupting, and you have suddenly the displacement of that much tonnage suddenly pushing down on Washington State, that would be enough to cause the eruption. And I went, very good thinking. I think so. So I think there's probably only one. It's possible there was still some more ice that slid down and backed it up. I'm inclined to think it happened at the end of the Ice Age. So that's kind of a lot more than you asked. But
no, just a follow-up. So I'm just trying to understand. So
yeah.
Are you saying that it took 2.5 to 3.5 days to totally empty that lake?
And if you want, we can go to 5. Okay, but you see, it's days. It's not massive periods of time.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's pretty well defined. So I didn't figure. I'm not one who's going to measure all that, but other people have done that. So I'm using their figures. Yeah.
Was the makeup of the land that the flood went over influenced the carvings that
Absolutely.
Made?
Yeah.
And number 2, was there a lot of shift of material from one point to the other that also affected the area?
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of deposits made in that whole area. There were gravel deposits, hundreds and hundreds of feet high, that happened in various places along the edges of the flood, and that would be stuff that was just ripped up and deposited. The main surface is basalt in that area. Basalt is a particular type of lava that tends to be more viscous and less viscous, and it flows, and it covered the whole state in multiple layers, probably during the time of the flood or shortly thereafter. And then this happened, the Noah's flood, and then this happened, and it went over the top and cut through the basalt. Yeah. So it's a harder material than what would have been on the earth during Noah's flood, because that would be layers of material that's really not set up yet, fully set up. Okay? Any other questions? Oh yeah, over here. Wait, hang on just a sec. We'll get the mic so everybody can hear you, especially me.
So the Missoula flood is post Noah's flood.
Yes.
But what years do they? Creationists.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so think about Noah's flood as being approximately 1,500 years after creation, and Lake Missoula flood around 600 to 700 years after that. So the dam came in before that, and then the Ice Age was expanding for about 700 years, and then it was starting to recede at about 700 years when that dam, I suggest, burst at that time. So, yeah, good question. All right, so go ahead, and the rest of you might just stand up or whatever you want to do, stretch, and we'll start on to the next one in just a sec.
Carbon dating, I was curious if, I guess my understanding is that specifically carbon-14 is the basis for the environmentalists or the evolutionists' basis for the Earth being millions of years old. They use carbon dating and specifically the variable rate of decay versus a constant rate of decay. You going to talk about that at all? Or?
Well, I didn't hear all of that, but let me say this. Carbon-14 isn't the issue, because carbon-14 is from living tissue, and it's only good for about 60,000 years, maybe 100,000 years after that whatever died, in theory. After that, it wasn't work. So what they use is radiometric dating, which is the decay of radiometric parent elements down to daughter elements, and they have a certain amount of time. And when they do that, they have to assume how much of each of those were in the rock before they came. Well, how do we know that? We don't. And they have to figure how much was decayed. And so the best answer I'd have to radiometric dating of rock is this. In 1980, there was an eruption of Mount St. Helens. About 12 years later, there was a third lava dome that had come up and blown away. The third lava dome was stable for about 10 years. A scientist, Dr. Steve Austin from ICR, went up there and grabbed some rocks from deep within the lava dome and sent them in for radiometric dating. They dated very accurately somewhere between 350,000 years old to 2.3 million years old. And they were 10 years old. That's all I say about radiometric dating. I don't need to know much more. It doesn't work. Yes?
One real quick question. Have you ever tried to recreate some of this in a laboratory setting for the science types?
No.
To show
yeah.
how the
Great question. I
acts?
think that's coming. All right. Now I'm going to show you some things in the Colorado River. You're just going to go, oh my. All right. And when this book gets out, and I'm not saying this anyway, this is God just dumped this on me. This is not Kevin Horton. He also dumped it on a kid from North Dakota who liked to run his Bronco all over the Badlands. So I'm used to going to gnarly places, and I proved that again this week. At 70 years old, I still go to gnarly places. But it's something that, I don't know, he just put on my heart to do, and it's turning out to be phenomenal. I just finished up a section of the Colorado River watershed, the Green River drainage, and I go, oh my goodness, I can't wait to write this up. So, but somebody is going to then take this and do it in a laboratory. That's what's good. That's the next step. That's not me. I'm 70. I'm kind of getting towards the end of this. So, and besides that, you can't take your Jeep out and do that. So, nah. All right, great question. Yeah, we'll take another minute, and then we'll get started. Are we ready with the next one? We are there. Stretch your legs. Is there bottled water here anywhere, or a cup of water? Maybe somebody could find me one. That'd be great.
I'm Don.
Hi, Don.
There is a company in Milwaukee that tests materials, and they can take a piece of material and age it 100 years overnight, and you cannot tell them apart.
Oh, yes, I know that. I've seen that, actually, yes. Yeah, yeah.
See, I grew up as an atheist and evolutionist.
Oh.
And I have fun when I encounter people because I know the questions.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? And, you know, it isn't just everybody's interested in this.
Right.
But certain people, they need to have these things answered. Yeah.
But I have met two guys that work for that company.
Oh, really?
And the one guy was on his way to Minnesota. The bridge collapsed.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
And it was interesting talking with him.
Yeah.
But they can age it, and you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Yeah. All right. Are you ready? Now, the Colorado River is amazing. How many have been to the Grand Canyon? All right, now, when you stand there on that rim and you look over that, what happens? You can hardly get your breath, right? It's just like astonishing. There's nothing like that. I mean, that's just like huge hole. How did that get there, and why did the Colorado River cut that? And that's what we're going to work at today, right now. And maybe present some different ideas on how that might have happened. Okay. So first, I want to show you this.
Sadly, the church is in decline today.
If truth does not exist, we will not be able to live and function as civilized individuals in a society.
Students in the public education system at large of our nation are left with the impression God's irrelevant because he's never mentioned.
We sort of have national Alzheimer's. Here we are, the freest country that the world has ever seen, with more individual freedom and opportunity to choose what you want to do with your life and where you want to go to church. We have that, and we forgot how we got here.
So we're going to answer the question, why all the fuss?
Despite ever-increasing efforts to undermine the authority and accuracy of God's Word, the Bible stands firm.
Science and the Bible are inextricably linked.
We see evidence of incredible design.
God has made it incredibly clear.
Men, listen to me today. God has a calling on your life. Kids need you. Women need you. Our country needs fathers and responsible husbands today.
55 out of 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Bible-believing, church-attending Christians.
We have the longest ongoing constitutional republic in the history of the world.
The Western world was successful because it was built upon biblical values. So that's coming up in 3 weeks in Missoula. And I know all of you, with the price of gas, are going to be there. So I'm sure of that. But you can go online at IBA and watch it, take it in too. And we have people from the Institute for Creation Research, Search for Truth Ministries, America Minute, TPUSA, Wall Builders, are all going to be there. It's going to be phenomenal. And it's going to be something that is worth taking in. And so if you can make it there, it's always valuable. By the way, there's some cards back there. It's always valuable to go to these things. Because in person, you get to talk with the speakers, interact, and ask questions like we've been just doing, but then also other people, and there's be resources there that you can take home, really valuable. But if you can't, IBA777.org will be live streaming it, and we'll keep it on there for you to watch at other times too. Okay? So I want to show you that. That's coming up. All right. Now, one of the things that struck me when I think about the Colorado River drainage is it's made up of really basically 4 major rivers. And those 4 major rivers converge with a great vengeance at the Grand Canyon. And that's one thing that I thought was very interesting. So there's the Grand Canyon, and the blue is the Little Colorado River, and it's pushing upward, and all the black are 3 different rivers. The Green River from up in Wyoming, right about where that point says Wyoming, that whole area south is the Green River. And then we have the Colorado River and the San Juan make up the rest of that, and they all converge at the Grand Canyon. So that's interesting, all right? So that's the Colorado River watershed. That's today's watershed. What I thought about is I realized that is probably a model of where the water went when the mountains were rising up out of the ocean. Remember, the whole earth was covered with a flood. Psalm 104 tells us that God caused the mountains to rise up and the ocean basins or the valleys to sink down. That ocean basin sinking, sucking the water off the rising continents, that water is ripping off the earth. But what's interesting about the Colorado River Basin is it's all in one section. It's all contained in a big funnel that's pointing towards the Grand Canyon. So that's very interesting. And the Little Colorado River makes up that little section there. Now that's made up, and now there is the Rocky Mountain front of Colorado. And all the water goes off and spreads out. The same thing happens in most of the Dakotas, but not quite the same. It does differently. We'll get to that in the next to the section. But the other areas, that's the Colorado rivers, and then you have the Green River coming in, and they all meet, and they're pouring that direction towards this rising Kaibab Plateau. The rising Kaibab Plateau, and then it's met with the Little Colorado River hitting it. And you have the merging flows. And I think that's what caused the Grand Canyon. So I don't know if you can see that. I just put that in there this morning. It's from the book that I'm publishing, and we'll just skip it. But there's the three different groups. The top, the blue is the Green River. That's interesting. Why did they make it green? And then black, and that's the Colorado. Then the San Juan is yellow, and the red is the Little Colorado River. Okay, now remember, I said floods go up, floods go down. Now, the Lake Missoula flood didn't go up. It just went out and down. So really, if you take that very top point, that's where Lake Missoula started. And it was just everything washed out. But the flood of Noah started and built up over the 40 days. And eventually, by the time of 150 days, water covered the entire earth by a depth of about 40 feet at the minimum, the entire earth. Okay? And then it took the rest of the time down to 371 days for the water to run off. If we look at that flooding stage, that's where all of the layers come from. And if you want to learn about that, Dr. Tim Clary of the Institute for Creation Research wrote a great book, Carved in Stone. And he used oil well logs from all across multiple continents and maps out the layers showing flood surges moving across the continent. It's a phenomenal work. That's not what I do. I don't do that. That's geologist stuff, okay? He's an oil well geologist. I'm a veterinarian, so I can fly a drone, and I can look down on the earth, and I'm looking at what happened when the water ran off. And so that's what we're going to look at, is those latter section of the erosion that follows. So this picture I took last year, and I was just there last week in the Grand Canyon, and this is Grand Canyon's gateway. And the sign says, and I'll have to move over here closer, right here, in 1861, the first geologist to visit the canyon, John Strong Newberry, concluded the Colorado River had carved the canyon. His findings hold true today. So the river carved the canyon. How many of you have heard that before? Yeah, everybody's heard that before. Now, it's interesting. Most people don't catch this. Continues. Why did the river slice through the plateau? And then it goes, geologists trying to piece together the puzzle. The answer is, we don't know. Now, do you know what that means? The Colorado River is coming along, and it's supposed to cut this canyon, right? Through a plateau, which is basically a ridge. Up here, it's around 10,000 feet. It's sloping down, sloping down, sloping down. And right here, in this ridge that's going down, it cuts through. Now, if it was going to cut through it over millions of years, it would have gone around, right? So what they're saying is, for a couple million years, the river ran uphill and back down the other side to cut the canyon. You see that? Now, what I asked a geologist at Dinosaur National Monument 2 days ago, I said, how did this river cut right through the mountain? He says, well, what we've kind of figured is that slowly was rising over millions of years, and the river started to cut a path, and it just kept following as it kept rising. I'm going, that looks like it was exploded. It doesn't fit the data. So anyways, here's the question. The river flowed uphill and back down over 1 million years? Really? I don't know how else to say what they're saying. That's what they say on the sign. They didn't word it that way, but that's what they're saying. All right, so here's the question. Is the creationists, the global flood view, is it inferior to their view? Is it equal to their view, or is it superior to our national park's stated position? We're going to answer that. I'm going to help you answer that now, okay? And we're going to look for the first clue is receding water levels. So I'm going to take you, this is not in Grand Canyon, but this is Hurricane Mesa. You said hurricane, but it's Hurricane if you're from there. Okay, Hurricane. And they also call it Monkey Butte because there's a railroad track on top of the butte. You see it there, the mesa? And they used to strap, in the 1950s, they strapped monkeys in there on railroad cars with jet engines behind them and shot them off the butte. It's true. I'd like to leave it there and just go on, but what they were doing is developing ejection seats for fighter aircrafts. And so they were developing a way to make the monkeys survive so our men could survive. And obviously worked because they're still using it. But notice the beauty, how flat it is, and notice all the dimensions. But as I was flying down, I went, oh my goodness, look at that. You got little shelves as the water is dropping from Noah's flood. They're carved in a place where nobody really walks because it's no man's land. Rattlesnakes and scorpions live there. But my drone flew over it, and I spotted it. And it goes all the way around the mesa. At that level, you can see the dropping water levels. That is evidence of flood origin of this whole mesa. Isn't that cool? That's really something. Now, remember that. Now, notice that it drops to one level, and then it still tips a little bit, and then it drops to the next level, and then it tips a little bit. And that's what I see on this flat top erosional remnant up there. This is near St. George, basically, Utah. So we have evidence of dropping water levels during a massive flooding event, which would be the Genesis flood, right? Look at this picture now. Do you see him? See them? In fact, once you start getting an eye for them, they're everywhere. You've been seeing them all your life. You just never recognized them. Look at them here. Do you see them? See them there? And you can follow it all the way around. The water level is dropping, and then there's another level there, and there's multiple levels. It takes you down there. And also notice that cone up there with a kind of a little shape on top, which looks very similar to what we saw where? Lake Missoula flood, right? The Two Sisters formation. Now, there we go. And also they're flat top. And you notice that yellow marker that's flat top. It's also, that crosses the Colorado River. This is near Moab and right near the Canyonlands area. And it's almost the exact same level there as it is across the Colorado River. All that got removed. That's a massive amount of material that was removed. Okay, there we go. Now here's, back up. So this is the Grand Canyon. Now look at it differently. What do you see? Is that going to play? Is that a video? Is it playing? Let's see. Okay, maybe you'll, yeah, see, it didn't play that. Let's see if we can go back and see if we can play it. Is there a, yeah, click that. I don't know what happened there. There we go. Now, I can't find my drone there, so I took this with my cell phone. But now look at what you can see now. Look up that valley. Do you see that level? It goes all over the place. That same level, all across there. See that? And there's other ones above that. And those are dropping water levels into the Grand Canyon. As we come back, we'll look at them again as it sweeps back, and you'll see that level will be the same. And you can see it crosses all the way there and there. And as we get across this canyon, you're going to see the same level. It's going to be right into that area too. See that? Those are all evidences of dropping water levels in the Grand Canyon. And now, once we see it, we can't unsee it, can you? You've now seen it. So if the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon were cut by a flood, that we should see evidence of dropping water levels. Do we? Yeah, we do. Yeah. And so that kind of goes against their statement right there. Turbulent whirlpools. Turbulent whirlpools? Are they associated with the Colorado River at all? Well, this is out by Moab. This is all part of the drainage going into the Colorado River. This is Big Mesa, northwest of Moab, Utah. And I was flying the drone up there one windy day. And I looked down and, oh my goodness, they're everywhere. Turbulent whirlpool caused little lakes. In fact, you can even see where the whirlpools kind of go in and out and leave kind of a little, sometimes they don't cut a lake, they just cut a kind of a right in there, like that, carve into the wall. And this is full of whirlpools. And by the way, it started me learning that whirlpools are on the edge of a major flow. You have a major flow going this way, and you have something above it, a rock in the middle of the stream, water starts coming back, and it starts these whirlpools, and you'll find them along the edge. And this is right on the edge of the mesa. By the way, then I went out to Lake Missoula flood, and I found them there too. I didn't know they were there. I went to look for them, and sure enough, they were out on that big, long one with it looked like a dinosaur back. and there was a couple of them out there. I found that out after I found these in the desert. In the desert. This is 700 feet above the desert floor, by the way, 700 feet. And that's where we have turbulent whirlpools. Okay? And then I was thinking to myself, the cone shape, is that related to a whirlpool? You think about a whirlpool, it's kind of tapered. So if that whirlpool is going around a rock, it could give us kind of a cone shape. You know, a little wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. And so anyways, look at these cones near Zion National Park. Up on top of the ridge, by the way, it's a cone field. It's literally littered with cones. How did those get there? On the top of the ridge, where water was going alongside of it, and I'm thinking this is caused by turbulent whirlpools. And so we flew a little further, and look at this cone field. I just couldn't believe it. It's got all these different colored rocks, so it's just really kind of pretty, but it's just like, that is odd. Odd. Most people don't see it because it's up on top of the ridge. You don't drive up there. You can't get up there. The drone got up there. Oh, she's having trouble. This is an important set, too. Is it going to lock up on me? Yeah, move it a little bit and see if it'll start again. Slide it forward a little ways. Right there, stop. If we don't get any more, that's what I want you to see. See, this is a cone field, and what do I see? Turbulent whirlpool lake. Aha! This is related to turbulent whirlpools then. Those cones are related to turbulent whirlpools. And there we see that up on top of there. So that, and then I started seeing little carvings where you can see where it looks like the whirlpool kind of went in and around. We're going to skip ahead, so we'll skip that. All right, so then I'm out to, by the way, if you ever see a license plate from Utah, that's what's on it. And that's called Delicate Arch. You see that guy underneath the arch? Now, he's got a funny hat on. That's used for droning, so you can see. That would be me. And I had a guy take this picture for me, and then he switched places with me, and I took some pictures of him, and when I was standing there, I saw it. I didn't see it before. Well, there I am. This is there. Do you see it? I'm going to tell on Tim Clary. Tim Clary and our good friends. I saw this, and I saw Tim Clary about 2 months later. I said, Tim, were you at Delicate Arch when you were out at the arches? He said, yeah. Did you see this, the whirlpool? He said, I never saw it because his eyes wasn't trained looking for it. We're being trained. That is a whirlpool. In fact, it's my theory that there was a big whirlpool there, and it was nicking and cutting that arch out. Now, I can prove that more later. But look at now, we're looking back at that same ridge. There's Delicate Arch from way away. There's the giant whirlpool. It's big. You see how big that is? And then there's a whole bunch of cones right above that. Cone fields, turbulent whirlpools, and arches go together. Isn't that interesting? I don't think anybody else has made that connection. I don't know what that means. Now, I'm going to show you my $1,500 video. You ready for it? $1,200. I don't want to make the story worse than it is. That's what it cost me to get the truck fixed, okay? See if we can get that started. I should hate to miss this one. This is the best one. Oh, my $1,200 video. Yeah. You'll have to ask me about that story later. I flew the drone up on top. What do you see above that arch? Do you see how that was formed? By the way, this is in the middle of the desert, 20 miles from anything, 1,500 feet above the water, above the river. And that arch, it's called picture frame arch, was actually formed by a turbulent whirlpool down inside of there and nicked it out. And that's the inside of the arch right there. You can see that turbulent whirlpool caused shape. This is in the desert where you just, when I wrecked my truck there, it was like, how am I going to get out of here? And that's every time I go on a trip, I have one of those, how am I going to get out of here moments. So maybe I'll grow out of this someday. So let's look up above that now. We'll just take a little elevated look at that. I mean, just take that in, and I'm going to raise the drone up, and guess what's next door? That one never cut through, so you see there's plants in it? That's because the water stays in there in the desert. And so there are some plants that actually live down in that hole. Now you look at this thing as I'm raising up, and you'll start to see the trucks down there to see how big this is. This is a big deposit out in the middle of the desert, flat as a pancake for about 4 miles in every direction. And then you get into some more of those kind of like cone structures on the top of Moab. Now look further. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? You know, it was interesting when I wrecked the truck and I'm seeing this water pouring out behind the truck, and I'm scared, and I zip out of there, and I get back and I figured out it was just I broke my diesel exhaust fluid, and I was able to make it work. And I thought I saw Whirlpool on that one thing, and I have to go back. I have to take a risk, and I have to go back. That one is called balcony arch, and you can see that it is formed also by a turbulent whirlpool. Now, I would love to go to Arches National Park with my drone, but they aren't real keen on that. I don't know if a creationist could get in there. I think maybe if I had a secular university back me, I might. But notice it's got that oval shape, too. Isn't that something? I think I'll take a higher view, and you can see my truck is right down there, kind of out in the sand, and that gives you the size. As we go up on this, you're going to see how big that is. And you see all those, there's the two different arches, and you can see kind of like water kind of curved around that. Do you see that? You'll see that curve shaped by water very commonly. So water was flowing off of the top and heading towards the Colorado River. Again, we're about 1,200 feet above the Colorado River, somewhere probably 1,000 feet at that point. So if the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon were cut by a flood, we might expect to find massive turbulence causing kulk formation. Kulk is a geological term for a whirlpool, okay? And we might have found them, and guess what? We do. We do. And then, of course, cones and towers. Well, guess what? They're everywhere. They're everywhere out there. Cones and towers, everywhere. And I see them here, too, by the way. I saw a number of them coming across Wyoming and coming up, that there'll be little cones and towers. And then we see dropping water levels all over the place. And here's another one. There's dropping water levels by it. And that thing almost looks like a little kind of a formation up there, isn't it? A straight formation. It's kind of interesting. And that's in Canyonlands. Now, remember Palouse Falls had that? Remember that thing, the crown thing I asked you about? Well, there it is. Now, I went down there, and I took its side view. Look at how thin that is. I didn't realize it was that thin. It's about a little thicker than a person, maybe two people standing side by side, and quite a bit longer. There's a guy there for reference. Now, I'm going to take you to Fisher Towers. I stumbled across this. I was looking for something else, and there was a parking lot up to Fisher Towers, so I thought, well, I'll go up there. Oh, my goodness. This is really something. So here's the sign, and I just took this 4 days ago, took this picture, and I want to fill in on this. Over thousands of years, the soft rock weathered down to the spectacular shapes visible today. Okay, so that's saying that these are forming, right? Would you agree with me? That's kind of what it's saying. Thousands of years, these are forming. Okay? So let's fly them. Here they are. These are huge. These are huge. On the side of a mesa. Are those forming today? How is that forming? What forces of erosion are going to wash everything away and leave them behind? Notice they have a curvature on the base. Do you see that little curvature? They're thin and tall, and they're called the Fisher Towers, and they're forming today. Now, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking they're falling apart today. I don't think they're forming. I think they were formed and now they're just eroding down. I mean, you look at how thin they are. You see there, you can really get a good picture, and you can still see that little curvature too. It's like somebody stuck them on there. I find that just astonishing. How did they form? But they certainly aren't forming today. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. Aren't they amazing? Okay. Oh, back up. Can anybody conceive a way in which these towers are forming today? You have a sheer cliff, and somehow or another, erosion's happening, so it leaves those little thin things sticking up 800 feet in the air, just out there in the middle of nowhere, thin, wide, and a little curve to them. Look at how that compares to that guy. That looks like something from a flood, doesn't it? All right, another thing is hanging valleys. See, I got the name right here now, not hanging canyons. Hanging valleys. And notice you can see that this is on top of a butte. And you notice it's got a little curve there. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm all right. Okay. Now, this is a bridge over Kootenai River up in the far northwest corner of Montana. And the river is beautiful because it has that glacial material in it that gives it that turquoise color. But now, what I want you to do is cut that bridge in half. Cut that bridge in half, take away half of it, and you would have that kind of shape, wouldn't you? That would be left there. And so if we take away part of a river, if a river was flowing and we cut off the rest of it, it would leave that shape. Do you see it there now? Do you see that kind of shape like the bridge? And then the water's flowing through there. The whole rest of it was cut off. And here again is another one. These are hanging valleys on the top of a ridge called Porcupine Ridge, right above the city of Moab, Utah. And it's called Porcupine Ridge because all those little porcupine things, those are probably water caused, but definitely had those canyons went way out across the valley to the other side and pointed up towards the LaSalle Mountains to the southeast of this town. And those point right at them. So that was all washed away catastrophically during the flood. But that was flowing there in the early stages and then got washed away, and they're left hanging. Those are called hanging valleys. Okay, so that is evidence that this whole mountainside was cut, this whole ridge here was cut, this cliff, catastrophically sometime in the past. And I'm going to say from Noah's flood. All right? So you can see how it even flew in them a little bit, and you can see that that is an active valley that was formed by erosion. All right. Now, on Google Earth, I spotted these. This is right above. There's Fisher Towers. Right down below, you can see a parking lot, a little white line. And so I tried to fly up there. I couldn't do it because of FAA regulations a year ago. I did fly up there this week. And I also drove up from another way, but I couldn't show you that because I didn't get time to edit it. But there's a hanging valley, and then there's another one next to it, and I was able to fly into this one that's kind of more of an L shape. You see that? And I was able to fly my drone into that very precariously because it was about 1,500 feet above me, and once I flew into there, I would lose connection. And if I lost connection, then the drone's got to figure its way out of a valley. And I didn't want to take a chance, so I'm watching it, making sure I could get it back. But what I noticed on the very end, now I started here. Do you see the other end's cut off too? Both ends are cut off. It's a hanging valley on both ends, a double-ended hanging valley. You see that? And you can see how high it is. It's up on top of this thing. That used to go all the way across to those buttes over there, those mesas. And that's all been washed away. And that had to happen catastrophically because it's a hanging valley. That's astonishing. Now, look at this. Do you see any hanging valleys here? There's a little Colorado River. Do you see the hanging valleys? This is the wall of the Grand Canyon. Eastern wall of the Grand Canyon. And it's full of hanging valleys, which means what? It was cut catastrophically by a flood. You see that? You see that? It has that very shape, that undulated shape. And there it is. And there's even a butte in the back just to show us that this was caused by flood. All right, just to make sure we knew. Now, I was flying the helicopter 4 days ago, and that's the pilot's head right there, okay, that black. And there was this butte out in the middle of the Grand Canyon, and what do you see on top? Do you see a kind of a river gorge there? Hanging on this end and hanging on the other end, and it actually continues. Did I put any markers there? Let's see if I did. Yeah, there it is. And you can see that it not only comes off this way straight at us, but then a little tributary goes there, and there's our hanging valley right there. In the middle of the Grand Canyon, right in the middle, there is the evidence. Somebody sent me a very old photograph when he had taken an aircraft through there, paid one of those flight trips, and he showed that, and it was all fuzzy, and I said, I think there's a hanging valley there. So that's why I went last week to fly, and you're the first people to see that. So that's evidence of the Grand Canyon was caused by the flood of Noah. So if it was caused by a flood, we would expect to find hanging valleys, and we do. All right? So we think about, as all of this water is coming down, pointing from above on the Colorado River, we have the Green River, the Colorado River, San Juan River, they're all gathering together. They come out and they come right to where the Kaibab Plateau is, and it hits the water coming up from the Little Colorado River. And what's it going to do when water merges? Like this. You're going to get some whirlpool action, and you're going to get some spillage over. Some of it's going to try and go around, but you got this pushback, so it's going to go over the top. By the way, you go on Google Earth, you can see the water tracks up on the Kaibab Plateau above the Grand Canyon where that happened. And here, you'll notice those yellow round arrows pointing direction. That's where the water's changing direction. And that's what we saw on the wall, the upper one. The lower one, if you notice there's a line there. I'm going to back up. Do you see that? I saw that from Google Earth. So I went out there. I said, I bet you that's like a little ridge where water spun around. I bet you that's what it is. And there it is. I put my drone up, and 3,000 feet. And you see that road, the paved road? That is the edge of the FAA no-fly zone. So where did I fly? 10 feet this way, all right? And I felt pretty safe putting my drone up there. So my drone's up there, and there's this ridge, and all of a sudden I hear, brrr, and here comes an aircraft right at my drone. And who's responsible? The drone operator, right? They can't see this thing. I just freeze. I figured if I move it down, there's a better chance I hit it. He went right under it or over it, I don't know. And I thank you, God, for that moment. But you know what I realized? Of course he came. He's flying on the edge of the no-fly zone just like I am. See, he read the maps. He knew he could fly just there. So that's why he was coming to get his look. But anyways, this makes a perfect circle. I saw it when I was on the helicopter too, but you can't really visualize it from the helicopter very well. So you can see that's that red line. And that's from the water spinning around where those two meet. And it was, I think, the Little Colorado River is what pushes it over the top and starts it just to cut catastrophically. And once it got started, nothing would stop it. Okay? So there's my theory on the origin of the Colorado. And there's, by the way, that red circle is the little butte we saw. That's also evidence. So the Grand Canyon was cut rapidly by converging flows running off the Rocky Mountains. Now look at that picture. We must consider the river when we make our hypothesis on the canyon. And so look at, this is Canyonlands area. And can you see out there at the very distance, you can see a cliff? Can you see a cliff line? It's probably about 7 miles out. Everything's gone. Everything's gone, 7 miles wide, all the way through Canyonlands. And it's just like, where did all that dirt go? What happened? Well, what's the evidence? I think you have that converging flow. And so we had evidence of this happening. What's the evidence of it? Dropping water levels. Okay, we got evidence of that. And then we have evidence of whirlpools. That went too fast. whirlpool cuts on the tops of ridges. This is in the Colorado River drainage area. We have these towers. And by the way, there's a converging of flow right here. So I think that's why those towers are there. And then we have cones and towers in the middle of nowhere. And then we have hanging valleys. They're diagnostic. So a question about that. Is this sign really rational? Is it scientific? Let me put it another way. Which view is better? Is our view or their view more rational? Our view is a far superior in matching the samples of simple observation. It's far superior, and yet it'll be laughed at, be scoffed at. Changing flows of the Grand Canyon. All right, did you get that? Okay, that's a lot. How's everybody doing? Do you see why I put South Dakota at the end so you wouldn't leave? Oh, yeah. I know you. I know how it is. There's a lot, okay? Stand up or whatever you want to do. Any questions? Why don't we do this? Let's take a 5-minute. Oh, well, go ahead. Let's do a question. Pastor, where are you at? Right over here. Stand up. You have to use the washroom. Do so.
Where am I going? Why does New York not look like this?
I was going to say something snide, but I didn't do it. We're in the West, okay? And all I can talk about here is what I know. When you get over to the Appalachian area, we have water coming off the rising Rockies. We have the Appalachians coming up. But I think there was a slosh over across the plains, and some of that went over the Appalachians. And you call them Appalachians, right? But they call them Appalachians. I have a cousin over there. He said, yeah, I went to Appalachia State. And I said, where? Appalachia State. I didn't know what that was. Figure out that's the Appalachians. Okay, Appalachia, okay. But I think that's the water there. But, I haven't studied that. So all I really give as my area of expertise is our area, from Arizona up to Montana. That kind of area is where I'm trying to have some expertise. Yeah. But I think it's different water flows. And I believe Mike Ord knows some answers to that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just kind of an observation along those same lines. While you were talking there, I was actually going online and looking at photographs, like in South Africa and Venezuela and Cappadocia, Halong Bay, Vietnam. There's all of the cone-shaped situations, and then as you look at it, it's a little bit, because if it's global flood, it's going to affect globally. It's not just going to affect us.
Right. Yeah, and it's going to be one of the things I talked about that I really got a real good look at on this last trip in the Green River in the Dinosaur National Park. The Green River cuts right through the top of a mountain, not the sides of it, the top. And then it goes further and meets with the Yampa River, and then they slice through a mountain range, and they slice through the mountain range. And I asked the geologist, that's where he said, well, it went up slowly. But the whole mountain range went up slowly, and I guess the river, I don't know how that happened, but it's amazing, and it's got to be flood origin. But it doesn't look like it happened slowly for a lot of reasons. But all of this say that is in Montana, there is the Lewis and Clark Caverns. Has anybody been there? Okay, so the Lewis and Clark Caverns is down in this canyon. That is cut by the Jefferson River. By the way, it's a 2,000-foot canyon that cuts right through the mountain, and it could have easily gone around 400 feet up, maybe a little lake here, and gone around over millions of years. It cuts right through the mountain. Well, the reason why is the water comes around a corner, it's pushed by the mountains here, and it's pointing straight at that, and it just cuts right through. And I understand that in Iran, there's hundreds of cut-through mountains by rivers. So it's not just here, it's other places. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a funny question. Do they know which way those vortexes were turning?
Well, sorry, one more time?
which direction where the vortex is turning? Clockwise or counterclockwise?
Yes. 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 Yeah. I mean, actually, you could probably figure that out, you know, depending on the situation. Well, sometimes you could. If it's on, let's say we have this ridge here, and it's on top of this mesa. And if it was, let's say, those that I showed you on top of Big Mesa, they were on the ridge on the right-hand side. So water's going this way, water's going to come back at it, so it's going to be turning counterclockwise. On the other side, if it was rolling that way, it would turn the other way. I've never filmed over on the other side of that. So yeah, I actually could answer that. Huh. Now that's my theory, and I'm going to hold to it because nobody can prove me wrong. So there we go. Yeah. Yeah.
All my life I've been told about Lake Bonneville.
Yeah.
Of the U.S. How is that related to the lake up in Missoula?
Not real carefully, but they're similar in some ways. The Snake River Canyon, called Hell's Canyon, the deepest canyon in North America, but it might be on the earth. I'm not sure about that. I know it's the deepest canyon in North America, was cut by Lake Bonneville. Lake Bonneville is part of the Great Basin. Are you familiar with that? Nevada is the Great Basin. Water comes in, never goes out. It has nowhere to flow. It's in a big basin, like a bowl. Mountains all around it. There's no exit. So when that first formed, that was full of water to the brim. And then it evaporated slowly. And in fact, some of those lakes, when it got down to a certain level, all along the shoreline, there was all sorts of plant life, animal life, until it got low enough that it became too salty. And then all the animals died out. But Lake Bonneville happened during part of that time, is that just by Salt Lake, this side of Salt Lake, if you're heading from Montana to Salt Lake, you'll be going over Highway 15, Interstate 15. Right to the left of that, about 30 miles, is another canyon area. There's a mountain between them, and that is where the dam breached. If it got up too high, it breached and literally burst out of there. I've taken my drone there, and there's an erosional remnant right in the middle of it pointing in the direction of the water flow. And it goes down and it catastrophically cut out that whole area of southern Utah and cut down all the way to Lewiston, Clarkston, Idaho, and Washington area, and that's the Snake Canyon. And it fed into right below Palouse Falls, same area. So that probably happened similar time, but we don't know for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I just was wondering, obviously, if we're looking at all of this, it would be a massive amount of material that has been moved. Is there evidence of where the material ended up?
I'm going to ask that question at the end. So in just a few minutes, if you can hang in here, I'm going to ask you that question, okay? All right. Because that is a great question. Boy, you got ahead of me on this. Okay, you're the first one to do that. All right. You guys want to finish this? Sandhills, Badlands, Needles, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska. That's where we live, right? And Montana, for me. North Dakota's where I'm from. All right, so the Sandhills of Nebraska. You know, during my freshman and sophomore year, I worked on a ranch on a haying crew in the Sandhills of Nebraska. Those are big sandhills. You start your truck and it's about 15 minutes to get over the top of one. And they are big sandhills. And by the way, how did all this sand land on the plains of Nebraska? Literally, the plains are below it. And you go away from the sandhills, it's the same level all the way around, and there's this pile of sand on top. Where did that come from? By the way, I look at the secular answers, maybe blew in, nobody knows. And then, how did the Needles form? That's kind of interesting. I always thought that was, I remember when I was in probably middle school, we went up there and we just climbed around those things. That was just a great fun. What a cool little spot. How did those form? And what is a good explanation for the South Dakota Badlands? I mean, they are strange. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, but it is like you're in a weird place, like otherworld type place. And it's just like, ha. And then, of course, I already showed you this, that sudden transition of the North Dakota Badlands. And by the way, the North Dakota Badlands are on the Little Missouri. In Montana, we have the Missouri River breaks. It's the same thing, just a little bit bigger and wider. It's the Missouri River breaks. And it looks just like that. You'll be just farmland, and boom, just drops down into the breaks. So we're going to look east of the Columbia River now, and so we're not anywhere near Lake Missoula flood. And we're going to look at these 4 states, 5 actually. I don't have Nebraska on there, I should. And so we have North Dakota. You probably recognize that one, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. And here's the point is we have a couple major rivers. And remember when we looked at the Colorado River, we're looking at the watershed as a clue as how the flood flowed, right? And that's going to give us a clue. So we have the Missouri River in north-central Montana, and we have the Yellowstone River in southern Montana that goes up into North Dakota. Both of these join into the Yellowstone joins into the Missouri right near the border there. And here's a point. The mountains rising in Montana and Wyoming form the surface features of the Dakotas and Nebraska. Okay? And I should have on there the mountains rising in Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota. What mountains are rising in South Dakota? Black Hills. They are the farthest east portion of the Rocky Mountains. Okay? So don't ever let anybody say we don't have mountains in South Dakota. We do too. We have the Black Hills. They are mountains. All right? And they're important in all the features you see around here. All right? We've seen planation surfaces, right? Remember that. And so I want to take you to this shot, and let's see if you can get that one to start. This is in Chugwater Creek, Wyoming. Anybody been there? Wow, look at these astute people. I never heard of it until I was there. And the pastor from the church, the Chugwater Community Church, took me up on top here and says, fly the drone. I didn't know why I was doing it. It was one of the best pieces of footage I have. And I looked at it a year later. What do you see now? What's that? Little water ripples? And they are along the edge of the flow. Notice the flat bottom where the creek meanders. Look at the cliffs. Look how flat it is above, flat it is down below. The creek just meanders in the flat bottom. And you see the cliffs that's flat on top. Then you have a cliff, then you have a 45-degree apron. Just like we've seen. This is at 6,000 feet. There's no big lake above that. What cut this? Look at this. This is from the runoff from the rising Rockies. Look at that. It's just astonishing, all these little finger draws that came off of this. And it's astonishing. And then to have those water ripples there, it's like, oh my goodness. And you see how flat it is up on top? It goes like 30 miles over to Grangeville. LaGrange. LaGrange? Where's that Bible college? Is it LaGrange? What is it? LaGrange, yeah. Okay, so we have flat bottom cliffs with creek beds with steep cliffs. By the way, you're going to see that all across South Dakota now. You'll see flat bottom creek beds with a little meandering creek, right? And instead, by the way, the farther you get out away from the Rockies, the water starts spreading out and slows down. So you'll generally not see a steep cliff. You'll see a bank. And it'll often be kind of steep, and then it'll be fairly flat up on top. It's all over the West. It's a way, this is caused by the flood, okay? Now, we saw erosional remnants, and this is North Dakota. This is right outside my window when I go into school, and they have the Air Force Base up there as well on the Davis Buttes, and you see water channels, all these things. They're just like typical buttes. See them here. You see them here, right? They don't have the steep cliffs because we're farther away from the Rockies. All right? So there we are, and we can also see water channels between the butte complexes. And they're all pointing in the right direction. Okay, they're pointing towards the Rocky Mountains. If we go backwards, this goes right to the Rocky Mountains. And the same thing there. There we go. So what are the Davis Buttes? They're erosional remnants from the late sheet flow of the Genesis flood. It's sheeted across, cut the top flat. So the whole area is flat, but now the water's starting to lower. So it leaves that behind and cuts the next level down. That's how it happens all around here too. Okay? And Crown Butte, this is Sims, Montana. This is very close to the Rockies, about 20 miles out. And notice on top, it looks flat, but what are you seeing now? You can see them now, right? You can see all of those water channels. You don't really see them when you're up there. You just kind of walk up and down these things. You don't even notice it. You had to get above it. And how did those channels form? Now, this is interesting, too, because there's a big one there. See how big that is? That's huge. Now, here, look across. It looks like, if you take the profile of that, it looks like a corrugated roof. You see that? The corrugated material. And there from the sides, you can see that profile. And if you filled it in, that's what's missing. That's all water channels. Now, here's the problem. I filmed this early on in my studies in this drone thing. I just was going out to Lewistown to a Bible camp out there, and I was going to teach the kids, and I thought I'd fly that butte. And I never saw those water channels until later. As I was just bringing my drone back, I was thinking through, well, they're going the wrong direction. Because the water's coming from the Rocky Mountains to the west, and those water channels are pointing like the water's flowing to the west. You see what I mean? The water's flowing from the Rocky Mountains that way, and it must come around the butte that way, but this is flowing back at it. And so I drove all the way to Lewistown, and about there I finally, I think I know what's going on. So here, see if you can get that to start. This is an irrigation ditch. Oh, I hope it works. Try to slide it forward just a touch and see if it'll go. Yeah, your computer's getting tired of us. You know, what we should have done is rebooted between. I had learned to do that whenever that starts to happen. We're going to take a break, and you're going to reboot it. Okay? So what I'm going to show you there, this is an irrigation ditch right down from my house. And the water comes through, and it's going through a big culvert. And then as it comes out, it widens. All right? So the water's shooting through like this. Well, what about all this water over here? So then it'll eddy back to both sides. And it goes slower. So the balls, we throw tennis balls in, and I'll throw tennis balls in, and the ones in the center just go, and then if they get to the edge, they'll come along the edge, they'll eddy back, and then they'll circulate around until they finally catch the stream again and go. Now, what do you notice is when the stream is going fast by and an eddy back occurs, it slows down. If that stream is full of super saturated rock, sand, gravel that it's just been ripping off the surface of the earth, and it turns and slows down, what's going to happen? It's going to drop. And the farthest out it's going to drop the bigger stuff, and closer in it's going to even slow more, and the smaller material will fall. Does that make sense? All right? So be thinking about that. So we'll see if we get that to start, and we'll see how long it takes them to get that rebooted. We debated on using my computer. We probably should have, but it worked so well up to now. And my computer I had to have specially built to be able to handle this much video. It takes a lot for these computers to do this. And then eventually the memories get all messed up. Okay, see if it'll flow. Darn. Well, maybe it's not going to do that one. Let's go on and see what happens. So you got the idea, right? Too bad. Oh, well, okay. So I'm taking you to Avalanche Creek. This is Glacier Park. Now notice what happens when the water gets in an expansion area. You see how it circulates around? And I saw this, and it's so funny. My wife, Tatiana, she gets so tired of me. She says, "Do you see that, Todd?" He says, "Yes, I know. Pothole. Yeah. Yes, I know. There's a cliff there. Yes, I know." Well, I get so excited, and I film these things. But you can see that spinning around there. That is in Glacier Park, and we're having trouble. We'll see how we do getting through things. Okay, so what I realized is this is that same butte, is water is going around this, and then it's eddying back, and it's coming back that direction. That explains that kind of cut the wrong direction. And then not far from that butte, about 12 miles away, is this butte, and you can see the lines on it. Do you see them? You see them there? And there they are from the side. Those are significant, aren't they? And they're pointing not towards, they're pointing a different direction also. They're pointing from north to south. So it's really kind of weird how the water is just going all sorts of directions here, and all that's been cut away as the water's going that direction. All right, so keep that in mind as we go further. Now here's the Beartooth Mountains. Anybody been up on Beartooth Pass? Isn't that a great ride? I have a friend of mine, we have different points of view on things, and I said, oh, that Beartooth trip is so great. You've been up that highway? He said, yeah, they cut that right in the side of the mountain. Why did they do that? Well, it was a great trip. How else are you going to get up there? Well, and you can see it right there. Do you see the road going back and forth up the side of that mountain there? All right, so it's 7,000 feet at the bottom, 10,000 feet at top, and I hope this fly goes. So this is flying into the wilderness. By the way, you cannot fly your drone from in the wilderness. You cannot land it in the wilderness, but you can fly over the wilderness. So I'm outside the wilderness, and I'm flying, and it's just gorgeous up there. It's a great place to backpack, but always have a coat. It might be 90 out, and if cloud comes over, you'll freeze you. It's just astonishing. It's so high up there, and it's far enough north. And a lot of this is, these lakes are caused by glaciers after the flood. But this is all glacial. I mean, this is all, I'm sorry, all this rock. And by the way, notice how flat top the tops are? That's where it gets the name, the Beartooth. The Beartooth, all right? Now that is, all the bottom area is granite, but notice there's an area of sedimentary rock on top. And this is called Beartooth Butte on the left and Clay Butte on the right. They're all one of the complex. And you can see how water just went around this butte. He's got a little tail kind of going to it, and the water went around it. Originally higher up, the water went through between them, and then it, for whatever reason, separated and left this behind, because that is sedimentary rock from the flood of Noah, has fossils in it. All the rest of it is from Creation Day rock, such as Mount Rushmore. Creation Day rock. All the sedimentary rock has been washed off. And so this is sedimentary rock, and it has all those layers, and you can see that it is a big erosional remnant. There's some iron-rich layers that are red on it, and it is semi-flat on top. And as we look at this, the Beartooth and Clay Buttes is a big erosional remnant, and it's strong evidence of water rushing off the rising Beartooth range. So as those mountains are coming up, it washed everything clean all through the Beartooth except that one little remnant to tell us that this was from the flood of Noah. How else can that be still there? And everything else is gone. So the Beartooths are at 10,000 feet, massive water erosion leaving behind fossil-containing sedimentary rock. Where did the water come from at that elevation? Well, you know the answer. Where'd it come from? Psalm 104, verse 8. The mountains rose, the valleys sank down to the place you appointed them. And as that happened, the ocean basins are just sucking the water off, and the mountains are displacing them, and we've got a ferocious amount of water coming off the rising mountains. That's why much of the Black Hills is all granites. Those are Creation Day rocks. Down on the bottoms, you'll find some of the sedimentary rock from the flood. They didn't get washed off. But up on top, much of it's the granites. All right, so we have to understand now our states. All right, Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, and Nebraska. We'll add them, okay? We have the Bighorn Mountains in central Wyoming. You see them there? And then over there where the arrow's pointing is the Black Hills. As the Rocky Mountains are rising up, the blue arrows represent water coming off the Rockies heading across the plains. Okay? Now, notice this as we move in closer, that the water coming off the Bighorns is going to run into your mountains of the Black Hills, right? And some of it's going to go over the top. And that's what's going to rip off a mile deep of sediment. Your mountains are rising up, along with the Rockies. They're all rising up. Water's rushing off. There's a mile of sediment getting washed off the top, and eventually get it so it's completely clean. And some of that's going across there, and it's kind of cutting through some of the rocks where cracks are, because it comes up and there's often cracks. And what does that leave? Needles. Needles. All right, so that's during that early stages. By the way, as I told you, I was right where that arrow is coming across from South Dakota on the other side of the Black Hills. That whole area, I see all sorts of evidence of water washing southeast. You'll just see all the erosional remnants are coming off the Black Hills pointing southeast. That's the water going up over the top and cutting right through. And then you have all these little bumps and hills. That is strong evidence of what that happened there. Now, and so that's how, in fact, your needles got formed. The removal first of all the flood layers, a mile plus thick of flood layers were on top of this stuff, and that all gets removed, and then the washing over the creation day granites left that little area. And that probably was an area where it kind of came up with a rise like this, and so it came over the top and hit that. All right, so it's going over the top. But now the water starts to drop. And when it drops, then we're going to see a change because it's not going to be able to get past your Black Hills. So it's going to go around the Black Hills. And so you see those two arrows that are coming from the Black Hills going south, basically. So there you're having water go south. Now, as it goes around the Black Hills, you're going to have an eddy back. Do you see that? You'll have an eddy back. The water begins to reflect off the Black Hills, goes around them, and you get an eddy back in Nebraska. And what's it going to drop first? As the water slows down, the heavier sands. Oh, was there any sand there? And then as it moves closer to the Black Hills, it's going to slow down even more, and it's going to drop the silts. The silts. What makes up the Badlands? It's very silts and sands, very fine, much finer material. And so that's going there. So that's where, right in there, is where you're going to get the sands in Nebraska. And then up there, that's where you're going to get the silts. And they're going to drop out a little bit in that area, and you get piles of it there. And so we look at Google Earth, and you recognize the two things there. By the way, I show this to many people around the world, around the West. And I say, what is this? This is the farthest east portion of the Rocky Mountains. Nobody knows. Nobody knows, because they're thinking mountains, right? Those are hills. No, they're the Black Hills Mountains. And that's the farthest east portion of the Rockies. And then that silt filled in right where the white is, that's your Badlands. That's your Badlands. Now, it's not cut yet. It's just a pile. It's a pile. So the coarse materials are deposited there. That's the sands. And the fine materials, silts, are deposited there. All right? So now as that's deflecting off, we're going to see that's going to go happening. And eventually it's going to drop even more. And now we're going to get water that's going to come right around the base. And it's going to form the White River. And that's going to cut through and leave you the Badlands. So it's actually going to be catastrophically cutting right through there. And that silt is still pretty soft. And it's going to leave those. So here's your Badlands, but they are weird. I still can't answer why they're so shaped like that. It's just the water coming around, some reason or another, with it being sort of soft, it must have left it that way. I mean, when I fly this, I just go, what a strange place. I mean, I love it. I think it's so cool. I mean, it's just really something. But notice how flat it is on the bottom. It's like somebody dropped mud and then sculpted it, right? And into towers with points, and it's like, well, that's almost like water on the tops kind of skating across it, forming that. And you can kind of imagine that maybe that's what that happened, is it formed much like the needles did. But here, I just look at this, and look at it's flat on top, and then it has these 45-degree angle aprons, and then it goes down there. See, that's where you tee off, okay? And the green is not very big. Good luck, because there's a big rough and sand trap. And I look at that and go, oh my, that would be, this is real pro golfing here. And notice it's flat. And then it looks like the dinosaur ridge there. And as we come around, and by the way, this is outside the park because I couldn't fly in the park. I come back around and we see that kind of famous dinosaur spine there. When we were flying in I was flying last week in the Grand Canyon. They took me on the dinosaur formation and had a spine just like that. Pointed out, and it was pointing out towards the canyon, water flow. And then it's flat out there. All right, but when I was there with Tim Clary, I think this was about 5 years ago. We were out 3 years ago, 5 years ago. He pointed this out. You see that line? That is a clastic dike. And he said that was a clastic dike, and I went, oh, that's good. That's nice. That's really cool. You know what that is? That is water under pressure shot up. Now remember, as I said, we have the eddy back, right? We have the eddy back, and it's dropping the sands in Nebraska and the silts here. It's dropping it so fast, water's getting trapped underneath it, this silt that's coming down, and then it finally pushes so hard it shoots up and leaves this evidence of it called the clastic dike, and then it gets washed away and leaves it so we can see it. So that is definite evidence that this was laid down with water underneath it rapidly and shot that up. Water ripples. Okay, you remember them, right? Here, look at a little bigger. You can see the Black Hills up in the far corner, right? And you can see the Badlands. What do you see below it? Sand hills are huge water ripples. In fact, look at the angle. You remember when I was showing you the picture with my drone of the ones in Montana, you could see the direction they flow by being perpendicular, right? So look at that. That's kind of perpendicular. And that one is perpendicular. That one changes direction a little bit. And that one different. And what is it? It goes back to the Black Hills. Water's coming around the Black Hills and making lines on the sand. This will be later now. We're getting towards the lower end of the whole flood, and we're getting the final flows coming across there, giving us the water ripple effect. There's the Black Hills, and there is the various angles in which the water flows, water ripples. So we look at this from the air. This is from Lake Missoula flood. This is from Google Earth. So satellite view. Lake Missoula flood, water ripples. You look at those and you look at those, they're the same sort of thing. Do you remember those in the ocean? Yeah, same sort of thing. So this is, I think, is from the eddy back. It dropped the sand, and then as the water got lower, it eventually came over it enough to leave us the ripples. And it leaves us those directional ripples. Okay? Cones and towers. Do we see any of those? Of course we do. And this is Chimney Rock in Nebraska. Anybody been there? Scottsbluff area? Yeah. Flew my drone out there, and what do you see? 45-degree angle, apron around it with a crown on top, a tower. And notice the top of it. This is sandstone. You see those cracks? You see them? How many millions of years do you think those have been there? This is supposed to be millions of years in formation, folks. I call it clock tower because as the ticking clock's telling us this has not been here long. This picture is 150 years old, and it was 30 feet higher 150 years ago. And they tell us this is millions of years, so that now it's finally breaking away. No, this is from Noah's flood. And this is on the edge of the North Platte River. It's on the edge. That's where we find all these swirls. It's on the edge. So we think about western North Dakota. We have a cone field pointing back towards the Rockies. Now, you're going to have to look closely here, but if you look closely, you can see Interstate 94. See that? That goes right through Dickinson, goes over to Glendive, Montana. We're about 5 miles from the border on the edge of this. There is the town of Sentinel Butte, and there is actually Sentinel Butte. Back up. There is Sentinel Butte down in the bottom. It looks, you can see a flat top. You see that? I'm pointing right at it. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. There is a cone field. Can you see that line? It looks like little dots, and it's pointing the direction of the water flow. That's the direction there, and that's the water flowing through the main valley between the butte and the cone field. Remember, it's on the edge? There's what it looks like. It's astonishing. It looks like this is wacko. Well, I think that's where turbulent whirlpools, because we had water going this way around it. You see that water was going around it this way, and there's the butte over there. See, that's Sentinel Butte with the red arrow, and water's going between these, and you had water circulating back. And so that's pointing the Rockies. Okay, so now another observation I made was something I just kind of stumbled across. You remember how the North Dakota Badlands, there's that line, and all of a sudden you have the Badlands. It's prairie, and then it's all this Badlands. And I realized that goes all the way down to South Dakota. And there's little creeks or little rivers, about 7, 7, 8, something like, depends on how you count the branches. Little rivers that end right at that line in North Dakota and South Dakota. The rivers are cut off. They literally are pointing back towards the Rockies. Okay? And they have really wide valleys. The valleys are way wider than they should be. There's this big wide valley, and then there'll be this transitional area that raises up. They're fairly flat. Some of them are 4 or 5 miles wide. And they go right towards the Rockies and end suddenly at the Little Missouri River. So how did that happen? So there's North Dakota, South. Oh, I got to go through that again. Okay. So there's the Missouri River. All right? And that's going to be the culprit that's going to be working part of this. And there's the Yellowstone River. That's an important part. And behind the Yellowstone is the Little Missouri. Okay? Now, there's the little, back up, there's the Little Missouri. And you see the red box? That's the 7 little rivers that come in South Dakota and North Dakota that all get cut off. And cut off by the Little Missouri River drainage. You can see the Black Hills and you see the Bighorns. The Bighorns make a funnel. They're funnel. And so we see a little bit of funnel here. And think about that. So there's our line. And those little rivers are left. They were flowing from the Rockies in the early stages, but then get cut off. Okay? And they get cut off by the Little Missouri River flowing around the back side or the west side of the Black Hills. And then all these other rivers go into the Yellowstone. So early on, we have the water, when the mountains are just coming up, we have the water coming straight across from the Rockies. And it's cutting all the way into South Dakota and North Dakota, cutting those little rivers with wide valleys, because water's filling the whole thing. Okay? And then all of a sudden the water starts dropping, and the Missouri River starts cutting a channel, and all the water goes into the Missouri River, and none of it comes across. That allows the water coming off the Bighorns to take over, and it pushes it north. And so it pushes it north. The red arrow is the Little Missouri River that cuts all of those off and leaves them as bottom-end hanging valleys. Just very big. They're bottom-end hanging valleys. Now, if that part of it is left, it's a top-end hanging valley. And if it's the other part is left, it's the bottom-end hanging valley. And it could be either one. Or in one case I showed you, there was both ends. All right, remember that? All right, and the water went around. Well, that's what happened here. The Little Missouri cut all of those off, and so all of those in North Dakota and South Dakota are hanging valleys. They are just like that, but they're real wide. So that is actually the origin, the headwaters of the Hart River, and it's a big, wide valley, and that's because it was cut off by the Little Missouri River flowing north. So it was flowing that way, and it still is. There's hardly any water there. It would never cut a valley that wide, and that one's coming north from the Little Missouri. All right, forget the Killdeer Mountains. That's significant, but there's those. We have all of that happening, and so that was originally coming that way, so you know it. And then when that started to form, the Missouri River did, it allowed the water from that basin. See that yellow line? That's kind of the watershed of the Little Missouri, and it pushes it forward. Some of it is the Powder River going into the Yellowstone, and the rest of it, the red line, is the Little Missouri, and it cuts that all off and leaves that canyon. That's how it happened. That's my hypothesis. All right, and that's how we explain that. There's a bottom-end hanging valley. So sandhills formed when water eddied back around the south end of the Black Hills. Formed early as the water cascaded over the Black Hills. First one, silt deposited in the eddy and around the south end of the Black Hills, south and east end. And then stage 2, as the water lowered, it started to circulate around the bottom of the Black Hills, and it cut through and cut this valley. And I don't know why it left those shapes. I'm going to leave that for I don't know. I still think it's one of the coolest spots. So you guys are fortunate. We were always, from North Dakotans, we were always envious of Black Hills and the Badlands. How come you guys got that and we didn't? We were always envious. But it's a cool area. Okay. So that's a transition, sudden transition. Stage one, the small rivers were formed by the water flowing off the Rockies. And then stage two, the 7 small rivers were cut off and left hanging as the water from the Bighorn flowed north. And that's how that happened. Okay. Whew. How you doing? All right. Does that make some sense? And just shake your head yes, even if you're not sure. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. All right, so you ready for your test? Now, you asked me a question. Where did the dirt go? We have to answer that question. All right? So that's part of the final test. How many have heard of Monument Valley and seen these pictures? I was just there 4 or 5 days ago again, and this time I paid the money and took the tour around the whole area. I was well worth it. That is so cool. What now? This is a great picture. Look at this picture. Now that you've probably seen this picture before, maybe you haven't, what do you see now? Digest this now with angles and arrows and things like that. First thing you should be seeing, sheer cliff, right? And the 45-degree angle apron, right? There it is. These are huge, but there it is. All right? What's that? Flat river bottom, planation. Planed on top, then it dropped down, planed the next level down. What is that? It's an erosional remnant. Why is it left there? Not sure I know. But they're left all over the place. They're buttes. They're just big ones. Okay? Then that, notice it has a flat top, has a little angle, then it goes sheer, then it has the apron around it. Look at that little guy. How many billions of years do you think that's been out there? You know, we saw this flat top, flat bottom and sheer cliffs. This is all Lake Missoula. We see that. That's just like a butte. And then here, that guy. There it is. And there's a bunch of those, by the way. There's at least 4 or 5 of them with that thing. And there's even some smokestacks that just kind of stick up out of the middle of nowhere. And so remember in Lake Missoula flood, we saw those? But I actually questioned, how many millions of years would that last? Come on. They can't be more than thousands of years old. Here's the question. Where did all the dirt go? Let's start with this area right here. Look how thick that is. That's 1,200 to 2,000 feet high. All of that dirt's gone somewhere. Where did it go? Sea of Cortez. Do you remember how I walked out there? My son said, actually, in that armpit, we were here on the armpit. We were right here, and you could walk out a mile. If you get farther up, you can walk all the way across to your death, because you'll never get across, 40 miles. And it's all sand. That's all that dirt from the Colorado River that dumped into the sea. Now, here's a better question. Wait a minute. Noah's flood. That's happening all over the earth. It's happening all over the world. Where's all that dirt go? Where'd it go? What's around every continent? Continental shelf. That water, all that sand, dirt, and this super saturated slurry hits the ocean, slows down. It drops and puts a continental shelf around every continent on the earth. And we have a better answer than anybody else. Why it's not just at the river deltas, but it's all around the earth. So it was going everywhere, going everywhere. BioLogos said, the evidence is clear. Now, science and history tells us there's never been a global flood that covered the entire earth. What do you think? Bird's eye view offers scientific evidence, you can't see it, of global flood. That's interesting why that went that way. Yeah, carved by water. The earth is carved by water. There you go. How was that? Questions? So we'll take a few and then, what time is it? Wow, we did that. Well, I said 8:30 and we're at 8:37. That's a record, guys. Okay. We had a question over there, yep.
Yeah, were fossils falling throughout the whole Noah's flood? I mean, when they find fossils out at the Badlands and stuff, are there certain things with different strata?
Yeah, there's certain stratas. Now, what Tim Clary has shown us, and again, this is getting outside of my realm, right? Because I'm the guy when it washes away. I'm not the guy laid down. Tim does that, but what he showed is there's flood surges, and so at the lowest levels, what we see is all the stuff around the ocean edge of the continent. Those are the first things that were buried. And then it moves inland, and it shows different ecosystems as you go higher up. All right? And then you have surges coming in, and what's interesting is dinosaurs are apparently able to swim fairly well, and then when the water recedes temporarily, can walk on that soft limestone and other deposits, leaving their tracks, and then another surge comes in and eventually drowns them. And all of the dinosaurs' bones, you ever seen a full dinosaur completely just standing like it was munching? Their heads are usually back in an agonal death. Their arms are disarticulated. They're wrapped up into balls as if they were just hit by a torrent. And so we see fossils at different levels, and some layers don't have any fossils in them. They're just rock and dirt. That's just how the currents go. And eventually it gets up to land animals and such like that. And we live in the dinosaur belt, kind of like, from Montana down. Where's that go to, Otis? How far down is the dinosaur? It goes down to Texas, doesn't it?
Well, it goes down to right to southern Colorado, and then you go down to New Mexico and Texas. You've got Waco, Texas, has dinosaurs even that far.
Yeah, okay, so that's kind of Dinosaur Alley. And that evidently was wash off of wherever they were living. Yeah. So you're getting in an area that's not my area. I'm the wash-off guy. I'm not what's in it. So, yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
And a number of years ago, I watched a movie called The Day After Tomorrow. Now, it's all about global warming. So
oh, yeah, okay.
But it shows how the water just instantly froze from this huge storm. And it's a fascinating movie. Just get over the fact that it's about global warming.
Yeah. I think I remember that movie. I think I've seen it too.
But it was just interesting to me that it showed these animals being frozen, standing on their feet.
Yeah, and of course we think of the mammoths, yeah. And Michael Ord gives good answers to that too, by the way. If you know who Mike Ord is, he's over in Bozeman, good colleague and friend of mine, and he'll be at our little conference. But he shows how the Ice Age in the early stages along the continental shelf was very mild. But as the precipitation, it was caused by all the vulcanization across all the continent, all this particles in the air blocked the sun. And then the oceans were warmed with volcanic material hitting the ocean, causing these great steam blasts, and warmed up the ocean. So you have a warm ocean with high precipitation, high evaporation, which will lead to precipitation. All the particles keeping it cool so it never gets hot or cold, it stays temperate. But that stays warm, and then it drops precipitously the last few years. And that's probably what happened to the mammoths. They just literally froze in moments. Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions? Well, it's great to see all the folks from South Dakota, as one fellow North Dakotan would say, and now Montanan. So, yeah, great to have you here. Great to see you all. And I remember a few of you from before, especially Otis and Miriam. So, thanks for having me. And any more questions before we quit? All right. One last thing is. We didn't do it at the beginning, and I really should have. But let's just give God thanks for what He's showing us in the world around us. And I'm really excited about what you're going to see around South Dakota now. For the rest of your lives, you're going to see this all over the West. But let's just give thanks. Lord God, we just thank you for your grace and mercy to us. Think about me in North Dakota, what an idiot. And you took that idiot, and by your grace, gave me new life. Restored my marriage, built a life, and then you gave me this goofy little ministry with a drone. Thank you for it, and thank you for what it's been revealing. Father. And now for these folks here in Rapid City, I just pray that not only will they see it, and maybe, and I'm not trying to sell a book, but they'll buy the book and give it to others, and people will start to see the evidence right here, and it'll change a lot of lives. That's my prayer. Thank you, Father. Glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for coming tonight. You're dismissed.